Sometimes thoughts have to be rethought, and sometimes your vision needs a revision. And today, we're going to look back at revised.
Yes, I gain it.
Right, revised laws of canon.
Reimagining Star Wars. Time
to engage your reimagination.
Reimagine with us by subscribing and clicking that bell button.
So initially we devised these laws of canon as a response to Doomcock's laws of canon. However, our intent was something different. It was not for you to analytically say, see, what you like is not canon. These were not intended to tell someone they can't appeal to authority of an author on something vague that's within the work. It's definitely not to say an IP can't be advanced by new owners. It was so that those creating new material regarding any franchise can be able to understand what it means and how to keep something accepted. A better way to restate this might be to say guidelines for a prosperous canon. So let's revisit these guidelines and see how they've been refined. So the first guideline is delineation. Delineation, the action of indicating the exact position of a boundary or describing something precisely. When creating multiple works, some of which aren't canon or are otherwise different continuations of the story, clarify which is canon so that there's no confusion among the fandom. Since this is a Star Wars channel, most of the examples are going to be Star Wars, of course. But the example that is given on what is not clearly delineated as not canon is the EU. Many fans have considered the EU to be canon. And by looking at the cover or looking at the inside of the cover, you definitely don't get the sense that what you're reading is not canon. And I think Disney tried to create a situation where everything that you consumed Star Wars-wise was canon. So when they struck down the EU, this was an attempt to rectify this delineation aspect of the guidelines. Not that they did it perfectly either. The second guideline, of course, is consistency. Consistency, conformity in the application of something, typically that which is necessary for the sake of logic, accuracy, or fairness. Works of fiction establish rules within the world it creates. This world must be consistent because the reader or the viewer is suspending their disbelief in order to grasp the rules and understand how the logic of that world works. This consistency is known as continuity. Continuity, the self-consistent detail in the various scenes of a movie or acts of a play or broadcast or a work. Characters don't change without a build-up or a sign they're going to change. And when between stories, if they do change, there's given context for how that change occurred. A rule of gravity doesn't apply on one place and not one other place. A rule of whether it's hyperspace or whatever it might be, it has to be consistent all the way through. The idea is that this is what allows people to suspend disbelief and allows them to immerse themselves into the story. Your brain is always looking for the rules, something to ground itself in its new reality. If that changes, then it throws off the brain, and the brain immediately pulls you out and says, wait a minute, this isn't real. This also applies to over silly or over serious characters in a world. If they're doing something that seems like it would get them killed in that world, then it's going to bring you out of the story. So the third revision is to moral rights. This is really just to say, know your audience. Knowing who your audience is means that you can adapt the content of your writing to address the main concerns of your audience. And if you know who your readers or viewers are, and they are specialists in a particular area, the writing style should acknowledge this and differ from an article written specifically for a general public. You've produced a work that has developed a fan base, and that fan base has taken their time and invested it into your imagination. Your fans like the way that you have crafted your rules, crafted your story, crafted all the pieces that make your world and characters come alive. If you want a harmonious canon as you expand your story, you need to understand them. And specifically, you need to understand the 20%. This is known as the Pareto principle, and this applies to just about everything. And this is basically saying that 20% of your fans, 20% of your work, 20% of your investments will produce the 80% of results. The 20% are your diehards, and your diehards are the disciples of your work. If you know them and cultivate them, your franchise will grow. This doesn't mean catering. It means taking the time to bring them along to any changes you intend to make. It means understanding their understanding of your story. Lastly, the death of the author is now changed to consensus. Consensus, the collective judgment or belief, solidarity of opinion, otherwise a general agreement. The audience has drawn conclusions on how your world works and how characters interact in this world. The intent of the author is irrelevant if not conveyed in the work. If the creator's intent or meaning is different than the consensus, careful consideration needs to be taken when enlightening the audience of the intended meaning in future work. These guidelines don't just apply to Star Wars. They apply to any franchise that exists or new franchise that will be created. So now that the sequel trilogy has been released and parts rejected by a good portion of the 20%, I don't know if it's all, but there are diehard fans that have rejected the new sequel trilogy and much of what Disney has released. What does Disney do now? So I think Disney has been learning their audience, and they're beginning to understand the consensus. So at this point, what they need to do is repair continuity. Can it completely be done? No. There are some parts that cannot be smoothed over. But if they give some context, they build the in-betweens, they fix some breaks in the rules, then people will mostly calm down. And when that happens, they can proceed forward and expand the canon in a way that maintains harmony within their fandom.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Like he said, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more. Click the end screen to see our stories.